David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila, broadcasting this week from Eretz Yisrael. Before we start the program, I'd like to dedicate all the limud Torah of this program for the refuah shalema of one of our listeners, a very heilige young man, Chaim Dov ben Risa Shoshana, who already for many months has been a Bal Yisurim, and he needs Rachbei Shemayim, and he's in the hospital now for an extended period. So let's all, with B'nei Chabura Kecha, let's say a capital Tzilim, and let's have Kavanah that all the limud Torah should be for the refuah shalema of Chaim Dov ben Risa Shoshana. So we have a fabulous program this week. You know, many of you may have heard that the distributor of beer for the greater New York area, that's New York, New Jersey, is a Jewish company that nobody realized it. And for many years, he hasn't been selling his chametz, and it's been a shaila. Anybody who drinks beer, if you've been to a Sholom Zacha, after Pesach, a reasonable chance you were on chametz Shevar Alav HaPesach, b'shoigeg, which the famous Nesiva says that by a drabanan on a shoigeg doesn't need kapara. But this year it was discovered that he's Jewish, and it created a big brouhaha. The OK sent one of its mashgichim, its head of Kashrus, Rabbi Kalman Weinfeld, to see if they could get him to sign the Shtar Mechira, and he'll tell you the story of how he did. But this Achdus HaRabbanim came out with a fiery letter, no beer by Shalom Zachav, except the Budweiser. Seems the turnover of Budweiser is very quick, so it's not from before Pesach. And OK came out with a similar letter that none of their restaurants can use beer after Pesach. As did Rabbi Moshe Elefant from the OU will opine it. They didn't come out with a letter, but I believe they made a statement. Rabbi Elefant from the OU will speak about it. So we have all the interlocutors of this topic speaking. We have Rabbi Moshe Elefant, the director of Kashrus for the OU, Rabbi Kalman Weinfeld, the director of Kashrus for the OK, and Rabbi Sholom Tendler, the senior Rav of the Star K. Each one will state their position. We didn't get this Achdus HaRabbanim, maybe next week. Okay, so before we go to our topic, I do like to always say something a little bit in Machshava, Chassidus, etc. And the Yemei HaOmer, the Yemei HaSfira that we are in now, is a hemshach between Pesach and Shavuos. The Ramban famously calls it, it's like the Chalamoid between Pesach and Shavuos. So we're finishing, we're in us, we're still absorbing the Yemei HaPesach. So I feel free to say a vart on Pesach, and I think it's relevant. And my question is, what's the difference between the first 2 days of Pesach? What's the message of the first 2 days, which are Yitzias Mitzrayim, and it's separated to the Shira of the last 2 days are the Yomim of Kriyas Yamsuf. What is the two steps of Yitzias Mitzrayim, escaping from Mitzrayim into the desert, and then Kriyas Yamsuf, out through the ocean to the other side? What are the two shlavim? And I would like to suggest, what does Mitzrayim represent? All the Baalei Machshava say, Mitzrayim represents the box that we are in, the Mitzarim, the outline, the delineations, the rubric that we all find ourselves in. It's a little bit tight. And what does it mean? We are afraid to go outside our box. Why didn't we take that step, or do that thing new, or finally get that nagging thing off our back? Why are we stuck in it? And for mostly, it's because each of us have a parei. What is that? Those are the fears. What are the fears? We know them all. I would say the first fear is the fear of society. What will so-and-so say, I'm afraid, if my kid doesn't get into that yeshiva? If my son or daughter doesn't do a shidduch that's up to this standard? If anybody finds out that I was fired, I failed at something, my shtella, my job, I mean, we know what social pressure is about. If I don't drive that car, if I don't buy that dress for my wife, or for those who go to hotels for Pesach, if you went to the wrong hotel, not to the cool hotel, whatever it may be, machine matzah, shmura matzah, all the things that we're afraid of. We all live in communities. Which school did your child go to? What are you wearing? Why is your child wearing the wrong thing? Is it true that there's somebody in your family who's struggling with depression? Oh, my goodness, we never heard of that before. We are totally normal in our family. All right, stay away from the totally normal family, by the way. So what do all those represent? Those are the fears, the mitzvah. It's the fear of humiliation, of failure. Let's say I fail. How could I do that new thing if it's a failure? Goodness, am I going to be embarrassed? The fear of embarrassment. And the fear of the unknown. Oh, my goodness, I don't know. We live lives of total fear. I shouldn't say that. I should say that fear is what prevents us from going to the next level of weird lives we really should be leading or would like to be leading or would mostly fulfill our potential. It's fear that restricts us, embarrassment, humiliation, fear of embarrassment, and also the comfort. The shoe that we're in is so comfortable because of all these fears. You know, there's a story with the Brisker Rav when he was running from the Nazis, and he ran from Brisk, and I believe he was in the city of Vilna. And the Dayan of Brisk, who was Reb Simcha Zelig, was terrified. He said, I have to find the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav was crazy Michael on Kashrus. He was afraid that the Brisker Rav would starve if he didn't bring him food. And he met the Brisker Rav after a search in Vilna. And the Brisker Rav was in a hotel in Vilna. And the Brisker Rav looked at him and he said, you know, I'm so upset that I'm not home in Brisk. And he said, I don't understand why. In Brisk, the police were always looking to arrest me. The government was always after me. I was the Rav who was Shomer al Hadas. And he said, and the Balabatim hated. It was so many tzaras in Brisk. Why did it upset me to be here on the run in Vilna, in a hotel? Nobody's bothering me here. And the Brisker Rav looked at Reb Simcha Zelig and he said, you know, I see now that when you're at home, as uncomfortable it is, it's the devil you know. He said, and that's why when you leave, even if it's the most uncomfortable situation, you would still be careful. That's They didn't want to leave. You know, it says, Chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim, 1 out of 5. The other 4 said, you know what, it's terrible here. But we're comfortable. We're complacent. And the Brisker Rav added on, he said, Avram Avinu, the first sign was Lech Lecha. Leave, Padan Aram. Leave. Do you know what they tried to do? They tried to burn him, kill him. They threw him in an oven alive. So why is he Lech Lecha? He said, because that's what complacency is. You just get comfortable to the prison you're in. Right? So we all have a tremendous fear. But you know what? One day we have the courage. And what do we say? That's it. I'm done with it. I'm going to stop living my life to impress people I barely like, I don't care about, I don't know them. I'm going to live my life, the life I want to live. I'm going to leave my fears behind. I'm going to leave my fear of failure behind, humiliation, social pressure, the unknown. I'm out. I'm out of here. I'm going to live my life the way I was supposed to be. When I was a child, my parents looked at me. They didn't want me to live a life of fear. They looked at me with a sparkle. You could do something. So you do it, and you leave Mitzrayim. You say, I'm going to leave it. And what happens? You leave, and then 3 days later, V'hinei Mitzrayim noisei achareim. It comes running. You thought you let go of it? It's coming right after you. You know that Napoleon, you were sure you're going to leave behind. You're not going to eat that black and white, whatever it may be. You're going to no. It comes running after you. It's glistening at you, right? It comes. The fear comes shining back 3 dimensions. And what happens? Pari neisei achareim, and they're caught between the fear and the yam. They're in a tight place. Why? The yam is the future. You have to make a road. The fears are in back of you. What does the yam represent in this story? You know what the yam represents? We all want a clear path. And what is the yam? You try to walk in water. You know how hard it is to walk in water? It's swimming burns 10 times the energy of walking. Why? It's because it's not. So on one hand, they have this a maze, a road. There's nothing in front of them, and in back of them are their fears. And what happens? And Nash, the Gemara says in sight, everybody was afraid to go in. I can't go in. I'm terrified. There's no path there. Nachshon Aminadav jumps in, and he says, Hatziledi kibo mayim ad nafesh. And what happens? They went by Yabasha b'saychayam. They found the road through the ocean of life, through the mystery, the unknown, the scariness of life. So there's two parts to Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not enough to leave the fear, because if you don't have a new path, if you don't have action, you don't create something new, it's going to catch you. Just leaving it is not enough. You have to find a yabasha b'seichayan. You have to find the courage, a bias towards action to find a new path. I'm leaving X. But leaving X isn't enough. Where are you going? And that is what Kriyas Yamsuf represents. So here with Yumeach Sphira, we left behind our fears. Say the Baidai, Chayiv Kalman, but where are we going? Are we going to put the time in and the energy in to create that new path? Or are we going to say, I left it, but do nothing? You know what? In that case, it's going to come back and bite you. Okay, that's my vart. So before we begin, I want to start asking one riddle a week. And I'm going to leave you with a riddle, and then we'll go to our topic. And here's my riddle for the week. The Shulchan Aruch says, in Taf Pei Tes Beis, we're going to ask about Sfiras Ha'omer, not to count Sfiras Ha'omer Bein HaShmashis. In other words, when it's dusk, Safik Yom, Safik Laila. You're not sure if it's day or night. It's Safik Midrabanan. And the Mishnah Berurah explains, he says, even though Sfiras Ha'omer B'zman Hazeh is a Drabanan, so why don't you say, Steik Drabanan L'Kula? So he says, so count then. He says, it's not correct to be machlis yourself into a safik lechatchila, even midrabanan. Midrabanan, we don't nichtas into sfeikis. Right? We want to be even midrabanan. We want to be above safik, so don't count bein hashmashos. Here's the problem. The Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Tzitzis, Siman Yud, Sivkat and Chazayim, discusses the following problem. For a beggar to be chayiv in tzitzis, it has to be split. It has to have a slit. It has to have four corners, which is why our talus cotton is totally open on the sides. It's four genuine corners, or a talus cotton. What happens if you have a beged that the slit is only halfway up, or less than halfway, like a frock? Why doesn't a frock need tzitzis? Some say because the split is less than half. If it's more than half, they round the corner. Let's say you would have a kapot that's only a little bit. Pata from tzitzis. If it's more than half, it's chayiv. It's considered open. It's called, has four corners. Less than half, it's not. What happens if it's exactly half? So then it's a safik midarai, so whether you're chayiv in tzitzis, and misafik we put on tzitzis. So we put on tzitzis, but we don't make a bracha, and we don't go out l'Rosh Hashanah, because if it's not chayiv in tzitzis, and you go out Rosh Hashanah, you're carrying the tzitzis because they're not needed, and it would be a shaila of haitzah. So the question is, are you allowed to go out to a Carmelist that's only a drabanan with this beggar that's 50-50? So, and do you say by a drabanan, safik drabanan l'chatchila, you could go out, or you shouldn't go out? Now, according to the Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Sfiras Ha'omer, even by a safik drabanan l'chatchila, we don't do it. And yet in Hilchos Tzitzis, what does the Mishnah Berurah say? If it's 50-50, and it's a safik whether you're chayiv in tzitzis or not, you're allowed to go out into a Carmelist where the isser of carrying is only a drabanan, because by a drabanan, l'chatchila, you say safik and you could go out. In Hilchos Sfiras Ha'omer, he says safik drabanan wa machmir, and you don't do it bein hashmashos. Safik tzitzis, you go out to a Carmelist, and we say safik drabanan wa mekel, and you go out. What's the difference between the two? Okay, now let's go to our topic for this week. And the topic is we're going to be discussing Chametz over Alav HaPesach. Everybody knows that the Gemara in Pesachim has a machlokes, whether it's a drabanan or daraisa. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Mem Ches paskins that Chametz over Alav HaPesach is just a drabanan, and it's because of a knas. But even so, if you're over on it, bein b'shoigeg, bein b'oinus, we still punish. We still make a geder. I shouldn't say it's a punishment, but it's a geder. Chametz she'avar alav HaPesach is aser. Here we have a case where somebody sells the chametz. Right? What's the story we're going to talk about? It's somebody who's an irreligious Jew who sold the chametz and continued to work there on Pesach. How do we view such a mechira? It's machlokes and achronim. Moshe was making it a number of different times. The Shvus Yankiv was making. On the other hand, other achronim were machmir. So you have the difference of opinions, and this is the exact case. So we're going to hear from the Rabbanim all the details and the debate. So this is a fantastic show. Enjoy it. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Rabbi Moshe Elefant, who is basically in charge of all the Kashrus of the OU, which means just about everybody listening to this would probably weigh 20 or 30 pounds lighter if it weren't for Rabbi Elefant. Welcome, Rabbi Elefant.
Including me.
Yes, but that's true. You aren't basically in charge of all the Kashrus.
I am. Well, the one that's really the head of the OU is Rabbi Ganak, and who's the CEO, and I am below him as COO of OU Kosher.
Okay. So, Rabbi Elefant, there's been a little bit of a brouhaha recently where the OK gave a hechsher on a beer distributor. And from what I understand, is the story is the beer distributor sold his chametz. He's a Freie Jew.
Well, Rabbi Lichtenstein, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to because it's not exactly that they gave a hechsher.
Okay, so
they did a mechira.
Okay, you're correct. I apologize. They did a mechira. Why don't you tell over what happened, and then I'll ask you.
Okay, so I'll tell you the story because it's been consuming us for the last week, certainly, and even before. We became aware. Okay. When I say we, I mean the major hashgachas, the heads of the major hashgachas became aware about 2 weeks or so before Pesach that Manhattan beer distributor here in New York, which distributes about 75% of all beer here in New York State, is Jewish-owned. And therefore, we have a real issue of Chametz of HaPesach. You know, you're talking about beer. For the record, they don't only distribute beer, they even distribute other alcoholic drinks, which are all chametz. So it's a real issue. So we had a meeting of the heads of the major hashgachas under the umbrella of ACO. ACO is the Association of Kashrus Organizations, and the heads of the major agencies sit in that executive, and we meet to discuss serious Kashrus issues on a very regular basis. And this was obviously a serious issue. One of the agencies volunteered to try to reach out to the owner of this company to sell his chametz. They attempted to reach him, and they got the message that he wasn't interested in doing it under any circumstances. Rabbi Daniel Levy of the OK, in his Shabbos HaGol drasha, so at that point, we reconvened. At that point, we, the agencies, reconvened and decided that we're going to have one more try at it. And the try we would take would be a reverse trial, reverse move, where we would call the various beer companies that we certify. Not that many beer companies are certified, but there are some, most notably Coors is OU certified, and ask them to use their influence on this individual to talk to us and perhaps agree to do a Mechiras chametz. And the agreement was that if we were unsuccessful by Monday before Pesach, we would have to make an announcement to that effect that this is a Chametz of Pesach issue. Rabbi Daniel Levy on Shabbos HaGodel spoke about this apparently in his drasha in his shul in Crown Heights, and two people who daven by him, and one of them is his employee, hearing the drasha, decided that they're going to try to take matters in their own hands to see if they could convince him to do a mechira. So Rabbi Weinfeld, who is an employee of Rabbi Levy's, spent Motzei, Shabbos, and Sunday, and he gets a lot of credit for doing so, finding out where this individual lives, tracking him down, and ultimately convincing him to do a mechira. This was Sunday. Sunday evening, I get a call from a colleague in the world of Kashrus who says we have great news. He has agreed to do a mechira, but there are two issues that are now coming up. One issue is that in New York State, probably not only in New York State, the law is you can't sell your somebody who has a license to sell beer cannot just transfer that license to someone else. It only can be transferred to someone else who has a license. And that he was saying that he's willing to do a mechira, but only if he could find somebody who has a liquor license, a beer license. So I was called and asked, do I know anyone who's not Jewish who has such a license? So I obviously don't know such an individual, but I called somebody who I thought may know such an individual, and I was, Baruch Hashem, successful, because this person told me, well, his number 2 man in his company is a non-Jewish individual, so he just could sell it to his number 2 man. That was the first issue that was resolved. The second issue was the regular Mechiras Chametz that we all do wouldn't work here. Because what's the Mechiras Chametz that we do? We take whatever chametz we have at home, whatever chametz you decide to sell, you put it wherever you put it in your home, and then you go to the Rav and tell him, I have this chametz in this place, I'd like to sell it and not have ownership for it throughout Yom Tov. Here, this individual was not up to closing his business for the 9 days of Pesach, actually, Erev Pesach, and the 8 days of Yom Tov. So the type of mechira that needed to be done is a much different type of mechira. It's a mechira of the entire business. And the entire business was to be sold to a non-Jew. So this is not this typical star that any Rav has. And a search began to find who has such a star. Rabbi Eckstein, for the Belzadai in a Bar Park, who was representing the OK, was the one that was collecting the stars and evaluating them, and finally chose a star that he thought would be best and that this individual would agree to sign, which he did. And on Monday afternoon, right before Pesach, the star was signed and the mechira was done. For the record, for a piece of information, this individual put on tefillin then, and it was the first time he said he put on tefillin since his bar mitzvah, which was over 50 years ago. So that's the story, the sequence of events. The issue is, do you rely on that mechira? Because there was a mechira done, but the business was open.
Yeah, but the business was owned by the person who.
Correct. So now we have a very fundamental shaila, and this is a shaila that we at the OU, I'm here 30 years and I've dealt with this many times. What do I mean when I say I've dealt with this many times? We have a question on all applications for hashgacha that come into the OU, and the question is, are you Jewish owned? And many people who apply to the OU, companies who apply to the OU, think because we want to give preference to Jewish-owned companies. The truth is just the opposite. Because we at the OU and other hashgachas as well feel that if you're selling your chametz, but it's not a real mechira. This individual wasn't really looking to sell his business. It was sort of a legal instrument to be a loophole to be able to keep the business open and not have chametz of a Pesach. So the OU, based on a psak from Rabbi Yoshe Soloveitchik, has never agreed to that. So whenever a company applies to the OU, which is Jewish-owned and manufactures chametz, we tell them if you're going to want to have OU supervision, you're going to have to be closed for Pesach. And many companies have declined OU supervision for that reason if they're owned by people who aren't ready to close the company if they're manufacturing chametz. There are other hashgachas who are more lenient and feel that it's a mechira, the mechira is adequate, and they could be opened on Pesach. And that's really the situation here, where we all realize that this individual had no intent of selling his business in a permanent way. Is that good enough or not?
So, Rabbi Elefant, let me ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Isn't it fair to say that most people who sell their chametz, even if they're not businesses, really have very little intent of selling their chametz? I mean, can you must know.
So many people have asked me that question.
Can you think of what case where the guy ever came to collect his chametz in your entire life?
Yeah, but let me ask you a question, because I'm sure you sold. Well, number one, I'm going to answer on two levels, because all Rabbanim, including myself, get in hundreds hundreds of questions about the chometz that they have left over as Pesach approaches. Is it chometz gomer? And many people don't sell chometz gomer for that reason. So we're starting with by many people, I'm not saying by everybody, and certainly not by stores, we're not dealing with real chometz. We're only dealing with kalim and tarovas chometz and chometz noiksha, which obviously is much less of a shaila than chometz gomer. It doesn't apply to everybody.
Even though, Rabbi Elefant, most people do sell their schnapps, right?
Yeah, but we know the Pnei Yeshu that holds that schnapps is not considered chometz gomer.
But we also know the Mishnah Berurah disagrees and says it is.
Right, but it was schnapps, and there are people that don't sell schnapps. But you're right, there are many people, probably most people, that sell schnapps. Schnapps developed is mekel. Many people rely on the Pnei Yeshu and other achronim that held it's not chometz gomer. And I'm not saying so. That's number one. Number two, and again, it hasn't happened to me. I presume it hasn't happened to you. And I'm selling my chometz for many years, as I'm sure you are as well. But let's say the individual to whom the chometz was sold were to come to your home on Pesach and say, you know what, I'm the owner of the chometz, I'm taking it all, but there's a price. He has to pay for it. And he gives you the price that it's really worth. So let's use your example. He's going to take all the schnapps you have in wherever you keep your schnapps. So if he'll pay you for what it's worth, are you really that attached to that schnapps?
No, the answer is I would absolutely give it the
You'd give it to him, and he'll pay you, and we'll all live happily ever after. Here, the individual is not going to sell his business. He's just not ready to sell his business even for whatever price. So it's not a perfect comparison, but it's a fair comparison.
Yeah, but I would respond to that in two ways. First of all, you could put a price in the shtar that is such that the guy would actually agree. His business is worth $50 million. You say, you'll sell it for $150 million. There is some price that if it's intelligent, the guy would say, are you crazy? I'll take the money, I say, right? The shtar just has to be done wisely. And second of all, the klal and kinyanim is dvarim shebelev edim dvarim. If a guy signs a shtar and la halacha is binding, it's a shtar.
Right. So the counter argument.
This is, by the way, what Moshe writes, but ask this
right.
question.
That's from Moshe's position. And again, the counter argument is that the shtar is not really the kind of shtar that is. If he was really looking to sell his business, and you're correct, everything has a price. And if the price is right, I'm sure he would sell his business, but it wouldn't be done the way the shtar was written, around the table with some rabbonim. It would be done with lawyers, with a negotiation. And that's why, and again, I want to emphasize, the OK and the rabbonim of the OK who effected this mechira deserve an incredible amount of credit. They deserve credit, and they deserve also that they were able to pull off what almost nobody else could. Nobody else could get this individual to agree, and they did. So that should not be underestimated and understated. The question is, do you want to rely on this mechira or not? It's a very simple question.
So, Rabbi Elefant, let me just ask you a few questions. This guy owns the business for 50 years, and the OU just found out about it this year. I understand from your story.
Not just the OU, all of us. Right.
Everybody. So let me ask you a question.
I don't know if he owns the business for 50 years. He hasn't put on film for 50 years. But he owns the business for many years. He owns the business for many years.
Let me ask you a question. Most of the people, including yourself, you have schnapps you sold for Pesach, right?
Yes.
Now, you could assume there's a 75% chance as a rove that it comes from this guy.
No, the schnapps is not. He's not strong in schnapps.
What?
No, he's primarily He's primarily in the beer business, not in the schnapps business. It's unlikely that you have schnapps from him.
Okay, so do you sell beer too, or just schnapps?
I actually don't even drink beer, and I don't sell beer, and I wouldn't sell beer if I had beer in the house. Because beer, I haven't seen anybody, although there is somebody that suggested to me the other day that beer should be I would consider beer chometz gomer, and I don't sell chometz gomer. But if your question, we'll cut to it. If somebody has beer from last year, if somebody has beer over last year, he has a shaila.
Yeah, everybody who has beer would have the same problem. They have beer. It's a good likelihood in the case of this guy. So it's Chametz, Shevar, Alav, HaPesach. So it's anybody who has any beer basically from the last year has to worry about this. Is that fair to say?
No, he only has to worry. Let's sharpen the point. He only has to worry about beer that he bought last year in the period between Pesach and Lag BaOmer or Shavuos, because by then all of his stock has been depleted, his stock of beer, his inventory of beer, and any beer you bought after that was not beer that he owned and wasn't Chametz Shavuos of a Pesach. But so to answer your question succinctly, if someone has in their home beer that they bought in New York State last year between Pesach and Shavuos or Pesach and Lag BaOmer, he has a very serious. He indeed has a serious question.
So then let me ask you a question, Rabbi Elefant. Are there problems with blias of Chametz, Shevar, Alav, HaPesach?
Well, I don't know how many people cook with beer, and I don't know if there's a problem, especially if it's bottled. So if you were cooking your beer, your pot wouldn't become a son. No, I don't think there's a problem with blias. No, they don't.
So
they don't.
Ask all your restaurants to be machshir kelim now.
Right. They don't answer.
Why?
Because Chametz Shavuos Pesach is only a knas to Rabbanan, and I don't think the knas applies to blias. Chazal did not make the knas on blias.
Okay. Now, did this guy enter his place of work on Pesach, or he?
Absolutely, sure.
That he sold on?
No. He was there. He was there.
So the owner was there as well. So
you mean the person who's the real owner, the person who sold it? Yes, was there.
Now famously, Rav Moshe was matter in this very case, right?
Rav Moshe was clearly matter. Rabelsky.
So
Rabelsky made an argument that maybe Rav Moshe would not be makel in this case, but that's not the simple reading of the Igros Moshe.
The simple reading is he does it twice.
Right. Correct.
I'm asking you, Rav Moshe is accepted as the Mara Asra of America. So even though you have many, there's the Marsham and the Maram Sheikh, I can give you a whole peckle of Poskim who don't agree with Rav Moshe. But don't we sort of an American eman that Rav Moshe is the Mara Asra of America?
So I'm going to respond to that.
Why would the OU be interested in being
because as you know probably as well or better than I, Rabbi Genek and many of the Rabbanim, certainly who were here at the OU in the earlier years, were Talmidim of Rav Soloveitchik. And Rav Soloveitchik very much disagreed with Rav Moshe on this subject, and they very much are in line. And that's been the OU policy because of Rav Soloveitchik's psak all of these years, knowing that Rav Moshe disagreed. And what apparently is as well as the case, there's a tshuva in the Divrei Yoel, which also follows that opinion. So apparently, there's a huge Satmar community, and there's a huge community that follows the psukim of the Divrei Yoel, who also was not in favor of this. So I'm chas v'sholom, not in the slightest way belittling Rav Moshe or belittling your comment about Rav Moshe as being the Meradas of America, but the OU never obligated itself to follow Rav Moshe's psukim l'kula and l'chumra, nor did other agencies.
Okay, now there are many other poskim besides Rav Moshe who pass in this way as well. You have the Chelkis Yankif, Rabbi, who was a very big posik. Took on like
again. This is a legitimate halachic. This is a legitimate halacha machlokes. It's a legitimate machlokes with legitimate two sides of opinion, and therefore, in my humble opinion, this is not to be viewed as a scandal. This is not to be viewed as a tumult. This is to be viewed that we became aware of a problem. An agency took the initiative to do the best it can under the circumstances, and now every consumer should make his and her own decision. Do they want to rely on the Seter, like you keep on repeating, which is based on a Pesach of Rav Moshe, who's certainly not to be discounted, or do they choose not to rely on the Seter and not buy the beer? And it's no different than any other decision that people make on halachic matters following different rabbanim and different poskim.
Okay, and we should also emphasize to our listeners that it's a knas rabbanan. So this issue is really about, it's a suffix on a knas rabbanan. Do we saimach on Rav Moshe and Rav Reish, or like Rav Soloveitchik and the Maramshik and the Marsham who are master in this particular case?
Right. Very well said.
Okay. Well, we thank you very much for your Avodas HaKodesh and for clarifying this in such a succinct way.
Thank you. Nice speaking to you again.
Kol tov. Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from New York City, Rabbi Kalman Weinfeld, who is the food service Kashrus coordinator for the Kashrus organization. Okay, welcome, Rabbi Weinfeld.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody.
Rabbi Weinfeld, we heard this story about the largest beer distributor in New York, and how he signed a shtar Mechiras Chametz, and how the OU is uncomfortable with it. Could you give us a synopsis of the issue?
So, first of all, I don't know if this is correct, if the OU is not comfortable. The organization that wrote something that they are not accepting in general such a mechira, not only this specific mechira, it might be the Star K and not the OU. The OU didn't say anything officially. The OU support us. They called me. They wrote a very nice. We had a meeting of many rabbonim. There was Meshabeach the Star. I got many phone calls from Dayonim, even from Williamsburg, Borough Park, and other kreisen. But I don't think this is the correct Mechiras. I don't know exactly what their policy is, but they didn't went out with any statement like that. Isachtes HaRabbonim was, yes, publishing a letter against this Mechira. And maybe I should begin with this letter of Isachtes HaRabbonim. And, sometimes they are very, very Choshev Rabbonim, Talmidei Chachomim, and Ofor Ani Leragleihem. And when I did the Mechira, I didn't did the Mechira as a big Rov or a big Talmid Chochem. I did it for Shlichus, like to do something for the Eibishter, and to be Matzil Klal Yisrael in New York State should not be over Chas v'Sholem on the issue of chometz over all of HaPesach. I was in touch with big Dayonim and Rabbonim to help me. They should send me the best shtar what can be. I had only a few hours until the meeting when I met Mr. Bergson, and I told him, please, I don't know about it. This is not my field. I'm doing food service, and please help me with the best shtar. One big Dayan that is always helping me and is answering me shilas from Monsi. He was very, very, very busy, and we need to remember that this was the week between Shabbos HaGodol and Pesach, and this is the most busiest week of the year for every Yid, and of course for Rabbonim, Moirei, Hoiroi, Israel. So Rabbi Eckstein, the Dayan of Belz, a Choshev Dayan, one of the poskim and one of the poskim that helps the OK Kosher when we need like an outsider Rov to tell us a psak, and he helped us. He spoke to other Rabbonim also, and the situation was almost not b'chdei sheyase, and you need a shtar, and you need a shtar in English, and a shtar should not say too much and should say everything, because if the goy and the yid and everybody there will see that it's too complicated, maybe that they will be scared to sign anything. And the whole Maise was a big ashkochepotis and a nest, the way how I convinced them, because this was not me, this was Mamesh, the Eibishter Alein, like the story of Pesach, Ani veloi malech, Ani hu veloi acher, so the Eibishter himself did everything. And like, I was once in a Sheve Broches, and every time when a father tells Advartere, he says, I thank the Meversten for helping me making this chassid, because it's a lot of it. So I was once in a Sheve Broches, and the father says, this time the Rebishter didn't help me. So everybody was shocked. I was shocked. And he says, no, don't understand me. Not good, chas v'sholem. I meant to say that the Rebishter not only didn't help me, he did everything. I didn't even help the Rebishter. This story, I did nothing. The Rebishter did everything from the beginning until the end. Ich bin gewinn a Gornish, that was making a shlichus of the Rebishter. And if you will have a few minutes, I will say about the story, but let me finish about the halachic part. And yes, if would be more time, maybe will be a different star, another few points of the star. But by the way, many Rabbonim, I don't want to be maxim, but at least 5 or 6 Rabbonim that I spoke to them today, after they spoke with me and they asked me exactly the details of the Mechira, they said, wow, so it's in ganzen another picture. It's in ganzen another story. For example, they didn't know that I was mefaret to the goy, that he is mekabel kinyan and he is koine everything with the deposit. And the guy that was with me, my friend Rabbi Sternberg, is a businessman that we have a chavrusa together, we have a kvias together a few times a week, and I took him because I didn't want to mashnayim in oechot. So when I went to the office of Mr. Bergson, he came with me. So when he saw that I'm being mefaret so much about the kinyan, about it, and I told him that it's not only the chometz, it's the binyonim, it's the business, it's the properties, it's all the storages, it's the 5 facilities and everything. So he was quetching me, I don't know how to say it in English, a knip. He was knipping me. He was kicking me in the feet, and he says, maybe don't say too much because they will be scared to sign. So I said, no, I have to say it halachically because Rabbi Epstein told me before I should say everything and I should be mefaret. And I told him that the deposit that he paid is only a deposit take, but with this deposit he's coin everything. And another few details that it's not the time because I believe it's a short time that I'm going to speak to you, so we need to accomplish everything. So if somebody wants to be machmir, we have the klal that kol machmir tov v'yolav brocha. If somebody wants to be soymech, so many snifim to be soymech and to be matir this beer, and not only a b'diyevet sheb'diyevet. And there is achronim that are saying that if somebody was thinking that he is making a mechire, and by a mistake was not a mechire, if mitzad the rov forget to sell, or whatever the case is, but the person was thinking that he is making a mechire, so because the whole union of chometz overall of HaPesach is a knas, that chachomim was kovea a knas, so loy konsuhu chachomim, there is no knas for this person because he did the right thing. He was thinking he made a mechire. Here, Mr.
Rabbi, who says that? Rabbi,
there is a chroin that was saying, and I don't have the Mechiras now, but I got it from a few rabbis that they told me that. And my
Shulchan Aruch says even by an oinus,
yeah,
and the Pri Megadim says even an oinus gomer, it's chamer she'avar Alav HaPesach. Okay, continue the story.
Yeah, I understand what he's saying. But here was a kinyan and was a serious thing. And when I wanted to write, it's a little schum about the Mechira of Pesach, so the owner told me, but you are doing a serious thing. This is something that is going to help the all Jewish people in New York State. You need to write a normal amount, write down $1 million. They was taking everything very seriously. It was like a bit of a stomach ache.
So Rabbi Weinfeld, how much was the Mechira for? After the deposit, how much was the Mechira for the
$1 million for the 8 days of Pesach, with making later on a cheshbon, exactly what will be the oitzoyes, the achnoses, the kinyan, the Mechira, and everything, and to see what is the profit, and then to make a cheshbon.
So $1 million for 8 days, and you're assuming then that he doesn't make, I guess, profit of $50 million a year, which would be, I guess, 8 times 360, into 365. So for him, it wasn't. If the guy would have come with $1 million after Yom Tif, he would have given him the Hitzos and Achnoses of Yom Tif.
Yes.
So then, why do you feel that? Why would somebody be machmer if the guy did a real mechira and the price was a real price? Why would you say somebody should be machmer?
So some people will be machmir not to buy anything what was b'mechira, like the Starcade. This is what they say. Rabbi Heinemann holds that don't use. So to tell you for sure
I guess we'll talk to the Starcade. But does Rabbi Heinemann sell whiskey? Does he sell schnapps?
I don't want to talk about what Rabbi Heinemann is doing because I'm not in Starcade position.
Okay.
And I respect him, a big Talmid Chochem, and he knows what he's doing. But let me tell you, we have many facilities in New York State. I don't know if I should mention the name, like Restaurant Depot. You have CNS. You have other places. They do the same thing every year with other respectable organizations, but no one talks about it. This is something that went out public because one reason, because the guy for the past 20 years didn't want to talk to any nobody about Mechiras chometz. Should I tell you the story how I did it?
I'm wondering. Rabbi Kleinfeld, tell me if I'm wrong.
Weinfeld. What?
Rabbi Weinfeld, I apologize. Tell me if I'm wrong, but the Svarim, and I honestly didn't have that much time to prepare for this, but let's say the Marsham or the Maram Shik, who are Machmir, are talking about where somebody sells their chametz and then continues to do business with their chametz, right? So you're talking about where the guy sold the entire business.
Right.
So
and it's something what
Rabbi knows. He could take a job in the business that he sold it, and then afterwards actually collect the $1 million. So it could be that, let's say, even the Marab Shik would be mine in this case, because the Marab Shik's case where he sold the chametz, he didn't sell them in the buildings and the business for that time.
What you said just now was a conversation between me and another. I don't want to mention Rabbonim. Rabbonim are not comfortable with saying names and v'chulu. But this was a discussion between me and another very Kosher Dayan from Satmar that I spoke with him an hour ago, and he said this word what you just said now. So many inyonim that are not similar to the situation of the Prime Godim and of the Maram Shik and others, and here we sold the whole entire company and not only the chometz.
Right, that's very different than the cases that they're talking about.
Yes, Rabbi Lichtenstein, can you give me a few minutes to say the Ashgoche Protis of the story, how I got to this?
Of course, absolutely, go for it, sure.
So, I live in Crown Heights, and I'm davening at the shul. The name of the shul is Beis Eliezer Yitzchok. The Rav of the shul is Rabbi Levi, the head rabbi of the OK Kosher. Of course, you heard his name. He gave a Rosh Hashanah Godel, and he spoke about this issue. Everybody should know if you are expecting a Sholom Zocher after Pesach, before Shavuos, buy beer now, because you're going to have a problem to buy beer, and it's a big problem. I was sitting next to my friend, Rabbi Sternberg. Rabbi Sternberg is a Lubavitcher Chosid, he's a Kapishnitzer Einikel, he's a Ur-Einikel of the Kapishnitzer Rebbe, all over Sholom. And I'm sitting next to him, and I said to him, I have to do something, let's do something. And he said to me, I know somebody that works at Manhattan Beer, a Yid HaShomer Shabbos, I'm going to call him. He called them Sunday morning, and he said, I'm not working there anymore. But you should know there's nobody to talk to, because I was trying, when I worked there, I was trying to talk to the owner, Mr. Bergson, a few times, and he doesn't want to hear about it. I think he never understood exactly what needs to be done. I said, I'm doing anyway. And the morning later, I was in New Jersey, after the George Washington Bridge. We have a catering hall, and I was training a few mashgichim to work there. And I was there the whole morning, and you understand yourself, the week before Pesach, in my department, we have all restaurants. We have the Kosher Pesach restaurant, we have the chometz restaurant, we have a program in 3 countries, and I had 230 mashgichim working for me, full-time job. Together, of course, together with my assistant, Rabbi Teichman. I don't know if you know him, he's from Lakewood, Rabbi Yaakov Teichman. And we worked together very, very hard, but the issue of the beer was in my head because, it's a mirchoil lechol hatzibur. So I called so what I did, I'm a Lubavitcher Chosid, so I called the Ohel of the Rebbe, the Tzion, in Montefiore Sanatory, and I asked the office should mention in my name, I should have Atzloche to be Meshachnea, to convince Mr. Bergson to sell his chometz. I also did, some Lubavitcher people are riding in Igros Kodesh, and they asked the Rebbe Shaile in Igros Kodesh, so I took a Igros Kodesh and I put the leather inside, and I got an answer from the Rebbe that a Purim dik answer, that in Purim there is Mishloach Monos and there is Matonos Levyonim. And the Rebbe is saying that it's two drochim in Avodas Hashem. One is Derech HaMuser, and it's a Heilike Avodah, a Heilike Derech, and one is Derech HaChasidus. Matonos Levyonim is more than Derech HaMuser. You're telling a person that he's a Evyoin, means he needs to do Teshuvah, and there is a Gehenim, Miu Sorah, Shiku Sorah, and it's a very, very Heilike Derech. And Derech HaChasidus is Mishloach Monos, is Lere'eyu, that you're giving another person a Mishloach Monos, and you are elevating him, you're telling him about the Eivishter Da'es Elokei Avicho. I got a remez that this is the way I should work with the guy, and I like very much to bake. So I took a corner in the catering hall, and they wasn't so busy, and I called my mother in Yerushalayim, and she is Hungarian from Wien, but she's like from the Overland. She knows very much how to cook and to bake, And I told her, please, Mommy, can you give me a recipe of a kokash cake? Because I was thinking Mr. Bergson, a European Yid, will never say no to a hot kokash cake. And she told me, are you crazy? Even Meshugoyim are not baking a kokash cake between Shabbos HaGodol and Pesach. It's chometz. So I said, but I have a very heilige purpose. So she gives me the recipe, and I did a kokash cake. And Mr. Sternberg, Reb Nosson, my Yid, gave me the address to the facility. Even was Sunday, I was thinking maybe he will be there. And I came, and they didn't let me in even to the parking lot. And then I called Reb Nosson. I told him, today you can find the address for everybody on Google. And I told him, please find me the address, the home address for Mr. Bergson. It's not easy because he lives in a few places. The details are not so much wichtig, but he gave me the address that he was thinking where he lived. And I was driving there, and I came, and I parked outside. It was easy to find a parking because it was on Sunday. And then I'm coming to the lobby with the kokash cake, and they opened the door for me. It's an apartment building, and I went to the front desk, and I said, I'm here to see Mr. Bergson. I have something for him. So he calls upstairs to Mr. Bergson, and his wife answered. And then she says, we have guests. We can't see anybody now. Please tell the guy to leave what he has at the lobby. So I left it at the lobby, and then I told them, let me be very open with you. I'm here. He doesn't know that I'm here for him, Mr. Bergson, but I'm here to appreciate it because he's doing something very huge for the Jewish people in New York State. So I have a little appreciation, but I don't want to nudge him anymore. So please give me permission to stay at the lobby until he's coming down. He says, how do you know that he's coming down? I said, I don't know, but I have a prayer book. I had a Tehillim with me. I will say the prayer to God, and God will help me, and I will see him soon. So he was laughing, but he was letting me sit at the couch by the lobby. 25 minutes later, Mr. Bergson comes out from the elevator together with his guest and his wife, and I'm going to him, and I giving him my right hand, and I said, like in Polish, like that, Sholom Aleichem Reb Shimon, and he gives me back, and he says, Aleichem HaSholem, how can I help you? So I said to him, I'm not here to get help from you, I'm here to give you a present. He says, what are you talking about? I said, one thing I gave you already, it's at the lobby, it's the kokash cake. And the wife was very happy. And then I said, the other thing that I want to give you is, because you're doing so many stock of a chesed all over America, I want to give you another matone, another opportunity to do something good for Jewish people. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you sell beer is chometz. So he stopped me right away. He says, you know how many years people are trying to talk to me? I can't really do anything like that. I don't understand exactly what you want from me. So I said to him, it's not a problem. He said, but I have a problem. I can't sell my company to a guy if he doesn't have a license for beer, according to the New York state law. So I said, we will talk to the rabbis. We will find a way out to do it. So he says, listen, Rabbi, I appreciate it that you're trying to do good, but I'm going now to eat dinner with my family. He gives me a business card, and he says, call to my office tomorrow, and we will see if somebody can help you. So I said, listen, Mr. Bergson, I'm very busy this week. I'm a rabbi that's in charge on 200 and something mashgichim. And the issue that I'm talking to you is a very, very emergency issue, and you can help many other people. So please go eat. Don't even think about me when you eat dinner, but you should know, even if it's going to take 3 hours, when you're coming back to the lobby, you're going to see me there. So he was laughing, but he left. I don't think he was thinking that I will wait for him. An hour and 55 minutes later, he comes back and he sees me. So I calm him down because he was maybe he was upset, but I told him, Mr. Bergson, are you upset on me? So already this is sometimes the way how to calm down somebody that is upset. That you're telling him, you're showing them that you know that he's upset. So he says, no, you spoke to your rabbi? I says, yes. And what we did, he made me a power of attorney to sell the whole entire company with the chometz, with the properties, with everything for him. And he understood exactly what he is doing, and it was Mekabel Kinyan, and he says I should come to his office 1 o'clock the day later, and we will do everything fine. When I came, I asked my friend Reb Nosson that he helped me with the addresses, and in shul he said he knows somebody. I asked Reb Nosson he should come with me. Like I said before, we came. Mr. Bergson was a little late. He apologized. And then he came to the office. He took us to the conference room. And we did everything. And we fixed the star maybe 3 times because he was so serious. He said, if this is something that's going to help people, we need to do it correctly. So there he had all facilities that he has in the Bronx, in Queens, in Brooklyn, 5 places I think was where he sells, where he has his facilities. And he took it very serious. He told me even in the middle that he's a little nervous about it, but he's doing this besimcha. And then the guy was asking questions, and I gave him all the details, and I explained them everything, that the deposit that he is giving is not only a deposit, but with the deposit he is koine everything, mamish already now. And then after Pesach, they will make a cheshbon with himself. If he wants to buy, he will make a cheshbon as well be. And then after everything, he was so proud, and even was a shopwright in Brooklyn that the Rabbonim in Flatbush told the shopwright before my Meise of the Mechiras chometz, they told them not to buy beer in Manhattan beer for after Pesach. So they canceled an order of 380 cases. After I made the Mechira, I sent to the Rabbonim that was involved the star. So they told already the Rabbonim in Flatbush that now it's fine. So they got back 45 minutes later the order of 380 cases. And for them it's a count. So they were so happy and proud of what they was doing. So then I asked Mr. Bergson if he wants to do tefillin. So he said, you know when was the last time that I did tefillin in my life? I said, when? He said, 57 years ago at my bar mitzvah. And he said he was going to a Hebrew school in Borough, I think in Flatbush or anywhere in Brooklyn. And he was kicked out of the school. And the father went to the rabbi. The father was a few years in Auschwitz, I think 4 years in Auschwitz. And he went to the rabbi and he cried, this is my son. Who will help me if not you? And he said the rabbi was teaching him from 7 years old until 13 the bar mitzvah. And this is why he did the Haftorah. He did the old parsha, and he was the Chazan Shachris, Psuke de Zimre Shachris, and Musaf in Shul. And he did the tefillin, and it was very much B'Yisrakshus. He was dancing with me. We was singing Simon Tov Mazel Tov L'Chovedis Bar Mitzvah. And he was and he said Shema Yisrael, and he remembered the Shema Yisrael, almost everything Be'al-Peh. And then I gave him a Sefer Kodesh, and I gave him a Mao, and I gave him also Shmure Matzeh, but not only 3 matzahs he should have for the Seder. A few pounds, he should have enough matzah, he should not even have the Yitzirore to eat chometz chas v'sholem all entire Pesach. I gave him a few pounds. And then, Baruch Hashem, the morning later, I got a phone call yesterday from a rabbi in the Bronx that is trying always to convince him to sell the chometz, but he is never picking up the phone. The office is telling him that, no, Mr. Bergson is not available, Mr. Bergson is not available. Sorry, first time in the history that this year, when the rabbi of Chabad in the Bronx called Mr. Bergson's office, was a day after I made the Mechira, it was Tuesday. And he said, yeah, I want to talk to him. And he picks up the phone, and before even the rabbi tells him something, he says, I did it already. This is how he was proud of. So it was a mamish kiddush Hashem.
Mamish hafla the Gemaisa.
Baruch Hashem.
I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, that I don't see Nishtam or Amshik, and I don't see anybody in your case would disagree. It's very different than the cases that it's Harama and he doesn't mean it. I honestly, there's a lot of Rabbanim, but Ramosha Feinstein, the Hokas Yankiv, or Matter, even by a mummer, Kavachayma, by a guy who says you would put on tefillin and did a bit of rakshas and ask questions. I think you did an amazing thing.
Even Moshe Feinstein.
In general, for the last 30 years, people are being nichshel. Or for the last how many years, people are being nichshel. You saved so many people from being nichshel. If you want to, you're right. If you want to be machme, keme machme zayin. But for all the people who didn't know anything, you will matel them from a nichshel. Tens of thousands of people.
So, Rabbi Lichtenstein, for to finish in a positive, all our conversation was positive. But I want to, if I did something good for Klal Yisrael, I want to wish Klal Yisrael with somebody that b'schus this, because we always drink beer by a Sholom Zocher, everybody should be able to make a Sholom Zocher in the near future.
Amen. And thank you very much. It was a really wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you for clarifying it.
Thank you. Psura Teres.
We have on the phone with us from Baltimore, Rabbi Sholom Tendler, a Kashrus administrator of the Star K. He's a Talmud of both Ner Yisrael and the Yeshiva Mir Yerushalayim, a Musbach by Rav Feldman. Welcome, Rav Sholom.
Thank you very much.
Rav Sholom, we understand that the Star K came out with a little bit of an opposition to using beer in the New York City area post Pesach because of Shiloh of Chametz Shevar Alav HaPesach. Can you tell us about this position?
Sure. So let me give you a little background first of the whole story of how this developed. Going back about 3 years, in Maryland, we discovered that in Maryland, 2 of the main beer distributors were Jewish-owned. So this issue was actually something that was quite familiar to us, and at that time we worked through with the distributors here, who were very helpful, very cooperative, to figure out exactly which beers are affected. In the case in the distributors in Maryland, no Mechira was possible for a variety of technical, logistical, halachic reasons, which are not for now. So in Maryland, particularly Baltimore, the people here are very familiar with this issue on having lists of which beers they are and aren't allowed to buy after Pesach. So fast forward till about 8 months ago or so, when I received a phone call from Rabbi Center from the Chavkei. It was actually more than that. It was actually right after Pesach last year, and he noticed that in one of the front page headlines of one of the major, New York media outlets, a non-Jewish media outlet, there was a story about this individual, Mr. Simon Bergson, who owns this company, Manhattan Beer Distribution, the largest beer distributor in New York. In fact, one of the largest beer distribution companies in the whole United States, particularly focusing in New York State, because due to licensing regulations, he's only allowed to sell in New York. And he's discussing his Jewish heritage and his Holocaust survivor parents. He was born in one of the DP camps, and that he's the owner of this company. So he called me and says, this sounds like it's a problem. I said, I know in Maryland you've been dealing with this. Can you look into this and see what you can figure out? So, we looked into it, and together with the Chavkei at that time, and it was discovered that this is a big problem. This company is 100%.
Let me go back every time. So what do you do in Baltimore if the distributors are all Jewish? What do people do with beer after Pesach?
It's not all. The way it works in beer distribution is and this is in Maryland and apparently in New York and apparently in most states, as strange as it sounds, the beer distributors, each one has an exclusive, a monopoly, so to speak, on their particular brands of beer. For example, the ones who sell Anheuser-Busch, only they're allowed to sell Anheuser-Busch. They have the rights to Anheuser-Busch in whatever distribution areas they have. Same thing with all the various brands, Miller's, Coors, etc. So in Maryland's case, there are 4 distributors. 2 of them are Jewish and 2 are not. So there's plenty of beers that are not chometz. There's also plenty of beers that are chometz. So we put out 2 lists.
What do you mean there are beers that are not chometz? What does that mean?
I'm sorry, let me correct that. There are beers that are not a problem with chometz of HaPesach, and there are beers that are a problem with chometz of HaPesach.
Because they're not owned by Yidden, so
the ones that are distributed by the non-Jewish companies, you put out a list, exactly.
I understand. So what did you do in New York? So you say that you found that.
So in New York, what happened was that we have been discussing this situation for a number of months, and many efforts were made, as I'm sure people have become more familiar with the whole story by now, to try to get through to Mr. Bergson to sell his chometz. But apparently, no one was being able to get anywhere. He apparently was not interested. He had reasons which were not invalid. He had concerns about it. He was not necessarily familiar with the whole process. And if you come to somebody and you say, hey, I'm here to sell. I would like to sell your chometz, and they're not necessarily religious. They don't necessarily know what you're talking about. We had that in the case in Maryland too. When we called them up, we tried talking to them about it, and they were very cooperative about it. But they were like, first of all, where have you been for the last X number of years that we've been in business, and second of all, what's chometz, right? Yeah, we're starting from scratch. They don't know what the whole thing.
Sure. Can
I
tell you a funny story? I had 2 guests by me on Pesach, 2 Sephardim who came from a foreign country, and very errant. They came to my house on Pesach, and they brought me a gift, 2 bottles of Johnny Walker Blue Label. That's like, I don't know, $400. They handed it to me on Pesach, and I looked at it, and I said to myself, you talk about Tedek Shenishma? It's a mazel they didn't bring me 2 challahs on Pesach, right? Right?
That's awkward. Wow. Okay, that's a good one. I have to remember that.
What did I do? I just had kavanah not to be kaida. I thanked them very much. I walked out, and I just put it outside the house.
but it's, I don't want to be bavaz at them or anything. They certainly meant good, but you talk about how they knew absolutely nothing.
Right, absolutely nothing. Wonderful people, these people. In Maryland for sure. I don't know Mr. Bergson personally, but in a particular case in Maryland, really wonderful, nice people, but no, absolutely nothing. And I'm not blaming. No one could blame them for that. But it was very awkward starting off this kind of a conversation. You're coming and asking him to sell his business for 8 days because we Jews have a problem. Like, excuse me? Yeah, thank you very much. Is this some kind of scam or something? So no one was able to get somewhere with Mr. Bergson on this issue. And so this was getting very close to Pesach, and there were 2 weeks before Pesach, starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we had a number of conference calls with all the major Kashrus agencies. Our involvement, obviously, is besides our previous experiences in Maryland, is that we do certify many establishments and caterers in the New York area, so it affected us directly. And we had many conference calls about, okay, what do we do? So we basically used the model that we had in place in Maryland, where we got a full listing of all the things that he distributes, which is, publicly listed on his website, and, put all the information together explaining what the issue is, which beers are allowed, which beers aren't allowed, and had that all ready to go. In the meantime, there were efforts being made to work on a Mechira. This is stretching already till Wednesday or Thursday before Pesach, a week before Pesach. And at that point, we said, if we're going to instruct our places, at this point does not look like any Mechira is going to be possible. And so we have to give our places time to prepare. They're going to have to either be able to have to stock up before Pesach or understand to make alternate arrangements. We don't want to call them up Erev Pesach and spring this on them that, hey, when you open them after Pesach, you can't buy any beer. We want them to be prepared for this. So we sent out a memo to our places, which was the listing of all the beers that were at that time deemed to be problematic and were going to be chometz of HaPesach. That was sent out only to our places, and at that point there was no Mechira done. There was no Mechira at all thought possible. Pretty much everybody was miyayish at that point that there was not going to be a Mechira. We sent it out on the Thursday before, a week and change before Pesach. Everyone else was planning on, following up on it the following week, and that was how the situation was left at that point. Come Sunday, and we get this very interesting message that Rabbi Weinfeld from the OK Kosher certification, this amazing story that is published now in all over now, and how he was able to convince Mr. Bergson in a very beautiful way. They made a tremendous Kiddush Hashem to actually sell his chometz, and that was a very welcomed surprise. At that point, a very welcome development at that point, because it solved, a very big problem that we were all struggling with at that time. That is, to alert our certified places, that's easy. We can tell them this is what it is. We can give some explanation, make sure they understand what's going on. In the New York area, we're talking about literally millions of Yidden, probably, and this stretches all the way up to Monsey and 5 towns also area. We're talking about probably millions of Yidden. To spring this kind of a huge surprise on people, in a sense, without causing confusion, is something that's very, very difficult. So this Mechira was going to be welcomed by everybody as at least an outlet, that we don't have to do that. That was everyone's initial reaction when we were discussing this Mechira. At the same time, obviously, as is becoming well known, that pulling off such a Mechira is something that's very, very complicated, the Halacha. And that was part of the conference calls that we had originally, throughout the whole process. What sort of Mechira could we even conceivably get? And then the whole situation fell apart. And then on Sunday, there was all these frantic calls. Okay, so he has him willing to sell his chometz. Okay, how do we structure this? Because, Mr. Bergson did not want to do anything that would be illegal. Selling a liquor business is something that's very, very complicated legally. So, you can't just sell it the way any Rav would sell chometz to any random non-Jewish person, because that's, quite frankly, illegal. You can't do that. You have to be licensed to sell, licensed to own, etc. So he had very strict conditions that he would not do anything that was illegal. So they ended up structuring the Mechiras chometz in the best way they could, keeping that in mind. Additionally, they ended up, obviously he wasn't going to close down his company for 8 days either. But again, there's a halacha, there's many workarounds for this kind of a situation, and the Mechiras chometz was definitely performed. So that was something.
So what is the issue that you're struggling with?
So I'm going to get to that in 1 second. So at that point, we decided that, okay, we're still going to alert our places. We're going to alert our places because Star Cape policy has always been that when you have a Jewish company that's 100% Jewish owned, no non-Jewish partners at all in the company, and they're going to be operating business as usual over Pesach, we do not do Mechiras Chametz in that kind of a situation.
Even though he's selling the entire business,
correct,
with all the hachnasa for that period.
Correct.
So you're not soymech on the tshuva of Rabbi Moshe.
Correct.
And it goes even beyond the tshuva of Rabbi Moshe, because Rabbi Moshe is talking about in a case where it's not apparent that the guy is serious. I mean, from Rabbi Weinfeld's story, it seems that the guy was very serious.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily the details of that. There's many details in this shtar that can be nitpicked at and can be discussed Halacha. Which way you want to go, whether he was willing to sign this actual shtar, whether he wasn't willing, he was just Mamana Shlichus. There's many different aspects to the shtar. But from the star case standpoint, and we had discussed this already in advance, is that none of that was particularly relevant for our certified places. And now this is this point that we want to make very, very clear, and that is that Star K has never done a Mechiras Chametz. Rabbi has never accepted a Mechiras Chametz for our certified places. A company that's 100% Jewish owned that will be operating as usual, buying and selling over Pesach. At the same time, Rabbi wears two hats. Rabbi is the Rav of the Aguda of Baltimore. He's a Rav, and he's also the Marav Machshir of the Star K. And he's very clear to differentiate between those two roles. So as the Rav Machshir of the Star K, for our places where we actually certify, this was not a Mechiras Chametz that we were going to recommend to our certified facilities.
And what's the halachic reasons? Could you tell us why?
The halachic reasons would get into, there's many different complicated aspects to the shtar. Primarily, the halachic objection is that you're going to have a company buying and selling as usual on Pesach by the same people that own the company, even if they're not technically the owners of the company. So, first of all, the chometz that they actually buy on Pesach is a problem. That is no way for that to be included in the Mechira necessarily.
Why not? If he sold the entire business, he said, with the buildings and everything.
Right, but he's still the one that's buying and selling on Pesach.
No, he's not. It's assigned legally to this guy who owns it, who is actually now the CEO of the company.
No, I understand. I'm saying, but Mr. Bergson in this case is still the one who's actually running the company, even if it's legally, or so to speak, halachic. I shouldn't say legally because it was not done legally. It was done halachically. It was halachically. I'm sorry.
Halachically. If halachically this guy owns the company, right?
Right.
And the guy is allowed to buy, and the guy is allowed to sell. So what's wrong with that?
Because that does not necessarily mean that the company is really 100% not owned by the Yid. Meaning, if he's still acting as, I'll tell you why. If he's still acting as the owner, right, and still running the company, so that does not mean that he sold the company. So that means there's a few issues. Then there's a Gemiras Das issue. Okay. Now I don't mean Gemiras Das issue whether he really has intention to really sell the company. Okay.
So let's look halachically. This guy sold it. And now Mr. Bergson, halachically, is acting either as an employee or as somebody donating his time to sit there, but he halachically does not own it. And the reason why, and I want to say that a lot of people listen and they say, well, you make a joke, it's halacha. I own a lot of businesses, and in the United States, you take a hedge fund, and once they become headquartered in Bermuda, they don't pay American taxes anymore. And you say, but I don't understand, Mr. Hedge Fund. Your offices are in New York. This is not a zeicher on your headquarters. But meanwhile, your headquarters are in Bermuda. And the answer is that's the law. If you're headquartered there and you do certain things, you are now a Bermuda company. So it's not a Jewish halacha thing. It's a worldwide halacha thing. In half the companies in the world, Apple is headquartered in Ireland and in the island of Jersey. That's how law works. So if halachically this guy does not own it anymore, and he did it, he said with an Ernstkeit and the Gemiras Das, that he said he negotiated $1 million for the 8 days, which is well in excess. The guy wants to buy it back, which is in excess of the earnings, but it wasn't too much in excess. It was negotiated, so now it is. So do you believe in a shtar mechira? Don't you believe in a shtar mechira? Is star case saimach or not saimach on a shtar mechira?
So again, this is Rabbi Heinemann's shita on the shtar mechira is the following, and that is that when you have a 100% Jewish-owned company, particularly one which is not owned by someone who is frum, someone who's Orthodox, he does not feel that there's a real Gemiras Das possible, that he's really going to sell his chometz to the full extent that Chazal had in mind. That's Rabbi Heinemann's objection. Now it goes further than that also, and that is that besides that, in this particular case where he specifically said, he said he did not want to sign it over legally. He did not want to sign it over legally. So Rabbi Heinemann feels also, additionally, that this particular case is not something that we want to get involved with.
Okay,
now,
so
let me give you an example
let's
to make
this
clear.
Case. Can I go back to you? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me give you an example. I'll tell you what happened in Maryland, okay, and why Rabbi Heinemann rejected the case in Maryland, and then you can make your own applications to the situation in New York. And my point is really going to be is that Rabbi Heinemann doesn't do these types of mechiras bichlal. The details are not even necessarily relevant. He doesn't want to do these types of mechiras. In Maryland, we had the following.
Would he do the mechira if the guy was not open on Pesach?
If the guy's business was fully closed on Pesach, he would definitely consider doing the mechira. And
let me explain to you. Let me just ask you a question. A guy's got a whiskey business, right? He's got, I don't know, $10 million worth of assorted schnapps. A guy comes in, sell it for Pesach. The guy's a fryer guy. He knows that it's never going to happen. You know it's never going to happen. Why should the kaveya be, the decisor be, whether he's open on Pesach or not? Do you think in that case there's more Gemiras Das than if the guy's open on Pesach?
Yeah, if he closes his business for Pesach, that shows he's pretty serious.
But if he's serious, but is he really going to sell it, his $10 million whiskey business, to some guy because he came in and some rabbi told him to do it?
If you pay him $10 million, if you actually give him the cash after Pesach, why not? That's what the business is actually worth.
Fantastic. I agree with you. So if he says, I'm going to give you the $10 million that it's worth, that's the kaveya. So what does it matter if he's open Pesach?
Because again, it shows that he's missing some level of Gemiras Das. He doesn't view the sale as being a real sale. And let me give you a case point, the case we had in Maryland, and I'll show you where Rabbi Heinemann objected to it, and you can make your own applications to the situation in New York. And again, I just want to stress, my point being is that these types of mechiras are things that are mechiras that Rabbi Heinemann has always had objections to. Again, as far as the Starkey using them. In the case in Maryland, where we had one of the particular companies, 100% Jewish-owned company, the owner is very willing and cooperative to do whatever. Really, they said whatever you want to do, we're willing to sign as long as it's all legal. We're happy to sign, work with you, do whatever you people need to work out this issue. So the first issue we had to come up with was finding someone who legally could buy the business, someone who was licensed to sell. So we got past that issue. We found another guy who was licensed to sell. We got that in place. Then what do we do with the fact that they're the ones doing the Yidden are the ones doing the ordering, and they're buying and selling items that are going to be coming in on Pesach. They don't own it yet at this point to be even able to sell. So it's a davar shelo. You can't make a kinyan on something that's not bal olam. So even though you have the guy now who's buying the business, right, but there's orders that are coming in now that are going to be coming in on Pesach from the guy, from let's say Coors, for example, right, which they don't own yet to be able to sell, right?
But so there we said, why don't you make an employee, for heaven's sakes? Employees do work on behalf of their bosses all the time.
So Rabbi Heinemann has to be a real shutfis type. In general, that's his objection. He doesn't feel that taking a secretary, an employee, even an executive of the company, and making them into a shutf, just for Pesach, is something that has real validity halacha to it. That's his shita. That's what he holds.
Well, can I ask you a question? Rabbi Feinstein, who I consider the Maradasra of America, and I think most people would, was matter this on two different occasions. Right? Why would Rav Heinemann go against Rav Moshe's psak?
Okay, so let me explain to you something about Rav Moshe's psak and the way Kashrus agencies operate. Is that number one, Rav Moshe Feinstein allowed it in certain extenuating circumstances. It was not something that he necessarily condoned lechatchila. It's something he held that is not necessarily mevatel the mechira if it's done, if it's buys and sells on Pesach.
He doesn't write any of those caveats.
That could be, but that's what he held. And you could ask any of his family members or Talmidim.
And he writes it twice, by the way. And in neither place does he write that it's a yeved. Okay.
I understand. I could say that with some level of authority as being his great-grandson, that I know from many of our family members, including my father, who was an attorney and has a lot of experience actually in Mechiras chometz, because shtaros are one of his areas of expertise. And I know from my uncle, who I spoke to recently over this issue, and David also, that Rav Moshe held this Halacha, it works, but it's not lechatchila. It's definitely not lechatchila to do things like this. If when there's no choice, there's no choice. Now, when it comes to giving a hashgacha, Rabbi Heinemann is very makbid about not just looking for a day that holds that it works. He wants everything to be without any
here's
shiloh.
your grandfather's lashon, okay? And this is Igros Moshe Chelik Alav Simin Kuf Simin Kuf Meb Test. This is Ulechein. Listen to this. Bor upashet. Bor upashet. Shamachira kayemes. Right. That's his lashon.
Right.
Does not sound like he's equivocating, right?
Right. Okay.
It's actually in three places. It's in three places. It's in Archaim Chelik Beis, Simin Tzadik Aleph, and again in Chelik Daled, Simin Tzadik Hey.
Right. No, I'm familiar. Everyone's familiar with those chuvas by now. But again, it definitely works lahalacha. But it's not something that he held was the lechatchila way to go with anything. It was something that was done under extenuating circumstances. That was the only thing that was possible. That's clear. I mean, we can argue about it from today to tomorrow, but the bottom line is that's what Ramesh held.
Okay.
That is what Ramesh held. So that point aside, when it comes to giving a hashgacha, Ramesh writes in many places himself in various chuvas agabe various other inyanim that giving hashgacha has to be something that's above and beyond. You want to give something that's 100% mechuder. He uses the lashon of something that could be mutter but mechur hadavar to give hashgacha to. In a sense, like for example, bittul, relying on bittul when giving hashgacha. So most kashrus agencies do not rely on bittul, even though bittul is 100% mutul halacha. But you don't give hashgacha on something. You don't put a stempel and say this is something that's kosher. So when Rabbi Heinemann always says over a Maisa he had with the Satmarov when Rabbi Heinemann was in his 20s, he was asked by Rabbi Aaron to be involved in building the mikveh in Lakewood. Or one of the mikvahs in Lakewood. Probably then it was the only mikvah in Lakewood. So who else in America knew anything about building mikvahs then? So they went to the Satmarov. He knew, he was a mumch in building mikvahs. So they went to the Satmarov for an eitzah, and he told him, the first thing he told him was something very interesting. He said, mikvah, mekik nicht in Shulchan Aruch. He said, mekik in Shulchan Aruch, the mikvah is shaim pasul. He says, when we're building a mikvah, don't look in Shulchan Aruch. He says, if you already have to open up a Shulchan Aruch and take a look, is what we're doing mutter, is it not mutter? It's already pasul. You got to build a mikvah that there's no place for a shiloh to even happen. So Rabbi feels the same when it comes to hashgacha, and that in that sense, he's not saying there's no way to work out shtar mechir in this sense. He said, of course you can work it out, and in this particular case, of course there's what to be samichan, and of course consumers can be samichan, and of course you can ask your Rav, whether you should or shouldn't be samichan. He said, for things under my hashgacha, I don't want to be samichan, and it's not, again, as I mentioned before, it's not just talking about this case. Again, as I mentioned before, we had the same issue in Maryland, and we worked out many of the various issues that would come up in such a shtar. We found a guy that was licensed. We worked out the kinyanim on things that would be coming in on Pesach. Even the achrayas issue that would have, even if the guy owns the warehouse, l'maisa, since the insurance policies are in the yid's name, right? So that would be an issue. Shulchan Aruch talks about that. All these things we had technical ways of working around, but at a certain point, at that point, Heinemann said, look, there's too much footwork going on here. He says, the bottom line is, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't want to go through all this fancy footwork to get this halacha good when we all know that the guy, he's not really selling his company except for our purposes. And that bothers me, he said. And therefore, he walked away from it. And therefore, in Maryland, we don't have a Mechira at all.
So can I ask you, on another matter, Indian by say Indian. We had spoken to a bunch of Rabbanim in Queens. There was a restaurant in Queens that served a $1,000 pastrami sandwich.
Right, it was 5 towns. Yeah,
5 towns, and I always said, it's zoilo v'sayve, according to it's shiloh according to the Magen Avraham, and it's an issa daraisa to eat the sandwich. I asked the machshirim, how do you give a hechsher on a restaurant that's giving a halacha, a hechsher on something that's a novel brishus hatayra, zoilo v'sayve? It's absolutely. How do you give a hechsher? I'm curious. How would you respond to that? And my point was, could you find the shtickle Torah to be mata maybe? But there's 50 rabbanim in your vad, and they are all saying that this is under our auspices. Well, under our auspices, how do you have a pastrami sandwich for $1,000? Zeil v'soive, when it's the rabbeim in the yeshivas, for them it's a week's earnings before Pesach. They can't put matzah on the table.
You're asking an excellent question, and this comes up in many, many, many areas in Kashrus. And this is where you're striking at a very fundamental thing that's important in Kashrus agencies, and that is the following, is that Kashrus agencies is not just about what's kosher and what's not. It's not just about what your policies are going to be and what's not. There's a big gray area in between in what's appropriate for Kashrus agencies to be involved with and what's not. Now, making that kind of call is something that's really a shaila chamura. And let me give you even a better shaila throughout. Let's say you have a caterer, right, that wants to, you have a company that comes to you, a couple that comes to you, and they want to get married during the 9 days, during the 3 weeks, on Cholamoid. On times when la halacha you're not allowed to get married, right? Now let's make this shaila juicier. If they're coming to the kosher caterer because one of their relatives or something, maybe a grandparent or something, they're not from themselves, but this one relative is Orthodox, and they won't come to the wedding unless it's kosher. But the chassan and kala, the bride and the groom, don't particularly care about kosher. The date is set. The date is not being changed. And if the kosher caterer can't do it, they're more than happy to go back to the relative and say, listen, we tried getting it kosher. We can't do it kosher. Yeah, and we'll go to a treifa caterer, right? So they come to us and they say, will the Star K be willing to certify such an event? So you can have varying answers to that question, I am sure, across the spectrum.
Is this halacha haliteu l'rasha v'yamus?
There's many different. Is it really lifnei iver? You could talk to me tomorrow if it's really lifnei iver. It's not lifnei iver. You can really these things have all been discussed many times. But this is something that you need a real pesach for. Someone with a real level of das Torah.
In this case? So
Rabbi Heinemann holds our policy is strict. We don't do it. If the halacha says we can't get married, then we don't do it. You're going to go trick. It's not my problem. How did you say we don't get involved with that. So, how far you extend those kinds of, so to speak, non-kashrus related issues, right, are something that really takes a certain level of das Torah of big rabbanim to paskin on. And on the other side, on both sides of the spectrum, you can hear where they want to go. One hand, you can say, we do kashrus. The $1,000 sandwich is kosher. It's kosher. There's nothing more for me to be involved with. I'm not a kiruv organization. I'm not a mussar organization. I'm a kashrus organization.
Yeah, but it's kosher. You're allowed to make a bracha on it.
Okay.
I hear something that you can make a bracha on, right?
That's interesting.
Do not make a bracha when eating this, right?
Okay, that's interesting. I hear that question.
If it's averit, it has a din of B'tzeiah berach. You're not allowed to make a bracha, yes, the Rav. You should put a sign up. Please do not make a bracha on your sandwich.
Okay, again, these are questions that, so to speak, are above the pay grade of many, of myself and other people. And these are the things that we have a tremendous pesach and a Rav like Rav Heinemann involved, and we go with whatever his hadracha is. And I'm assuming and I'm hopeful that and I know many other kashrus agencies obviously have rabbanim who they ask their shilas to, and this would be one of the shilas they should hopefully have asked: is this something that's appropriate for us to give a hashgacha to or not? I know we have had situations like this come up. I can't get into details. But similar types of situations, not $1,000 sandwich per se, but some of the details where it was like, it's as they say, shmek epis. It's not appropriate for us to be giving a hashgacha. And Rabbi Heinemann puts his foot down. Two examples I could give you is pool parties or poolside parties. Rabbi Heinemann does not let our caterers do them.
Right.
I mean, we've had many sticky situations where they've showed up, and it was in a clubhouse next to a pool, open in the middle of the summer, and Rabbi Heinemann made them close the curtains, even though the pool was supposed to be part of the avirah of the event. Right. He said, "No, I will not give the hashgacha on these circumstances."
Right.
So each situation has to be done very carefully.
Would you give a to a restaurant that's open on Shabbos?
A Jewish restaurant open Shabbos? Definitely not.
Yeah, either food is kosher.
Right, 100%. Right, definitely not. But again, these are things that go beyond the kashrus spectrum. Some rabbanim, I hope I've received hadracha to say, let's stop it right there. If it's kosher, it's kosher. Otherwise, the rabbanim machshirim, the I don't want to say higher level rabbanim. And this is something that needs a big psak in how far they're supposed to go. So Baruch Hashem, we have Rabbi Heinemann gives us hadracha. I can't say what we would or wouldn't do in the case of the $1,000 sandwich. It's not relevant. I didn't ask Rabbi Heinemann about it, but that's something we would definitely have asked him about. And receive this hadracha. Getting back to the Mechiras Chametz, so this is also something that in la halacha, the star case position is there's definitely what to be samech on. And I want to be very clear that the OK deserves tremendous yashar koach for pulling this off, because it's something that was definitely a hatzalah on many levels. that people can avoid.
Most of the people,
right? Most of the frum people, that they'll avoid having a chometz over Pesach. At the same time, particularly for the places that we're giving hashgacha to, which again is the only place that we're focusing on, the only place we're making a statement about is for our certified places. Rabbi Heinemann is being machmir, and it's nothing specific to this case. We had it in Maryland, and he's always been very machmir about these types of situations with Mechiras Chametz and these kinds of companies.
Rabbi Tendler, thank you very much. It's an honor having you on, and Befrat, an edicle of the great, the HaPesach of the world, the HaPesach of America, Rabbi Shevar. It's an honor to have you with us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.